Hello guys, so today let's talk about hats for the body types. 2 weeks ago I made hat guide video. It's very important video to watch just to educate yourself about different hats and what aesthetics these hats represent and what cliche people have about this or that hat and in which styles these hats normally look okay. And then in my next video 1 week ago we talked about face shapes. So I'm gonna leave the links on those two first videos down below. And today we're gonna use David Kibbe technology, David Kibbe image identities or body types. I'm gonna leave the link down below on my playlist. We're gonna talk today about 13 types. Of course, it's not working like this hat is just for your type and not for this type. Even though in the 80s, in the book Metamorphosis, David Kibbe was kind of assigning special type of a hat to a certain type, now he's saying you can have any type of clothes and any type of accessory. It's mostly important how you balance it in your outfit. So before you watch this video, you should know that any hat that you have at home, you can make it work for yourself. It just depends on how you balance it with the rest of the lines. And that's what we're gonna talk about today. Besides of showing you all those hats now, I'm gonna also read you that small part of the book where David Kibbe says about hats for each type. But you should also understand that in the 80s, the amount of hats that were common in female fashion was limited. Today's fashion is a little bit changed. This is what David Kibbe in his book said about hats for dramatics. Hats should be crisp and geometric and man-tailored with wide brims and sharp edges. So basically he was talking about that classic fedora hat that we have now. And then he says you might not look as good in delicate antique looking styles, small symmetrical pieces, or too glitzy hats. If we look at trilby and bowler, those two hats are quite small. However, I think you can still incorporate it in your style if the rest you keep quite narrow and elongated, because these hats create kind of like that small spot on your head. So we don't want to make your head look too small. If you feel like it is happening, just buy a hat with bigger brim, that's all. Now, boater, sun hat look great. Floppy hat, anything floppy for dramatics, David Kibbe doesn't recommend just because dramatics look best if everything is on a sharper and stiffer side, but you can still try because there's loads of different kinds of floppy hats. And I think floppy hat looks amazing. It looks slightly softer, but you can still find something with bigger crown and with more square crown and with bigger brim. Cloche hat, you know, David Kibbe was writing about that dramatics would look great in Art Deco style. And cloche hat is actually Art Deco style. So you can try yourself, but it's still not quite enough sharpness and geometry in this and not enough size. So that sometimes can look quite small on you, and as a contrast, your bone structure can look just more angular, more sharp and more prominent. So you just look for yourself or get cloche that is just larger and with more elongated top. Bucket hat would look great, especially for everyday style. Newsboy cap can be slightly too slouchy for them. Mariner's cap, some can say it's quite small for them. It's still sharp though, it keeps its shape. So from my viewpoint, if you are going for that style already that is quite sharp and quite precise, why don't you just try it? It might look very cool. Military cap can look great. Flat cap can actually look great if it doesn't flatten your top too much. And also you can probably choose something on the larger side. Just in general, if you feel like your bone structure is getting just larger, if you're wearing something too tiny, get it in slightly bigger size or just choose something with bigger brim. Baseball cap looks amazing on everyone basically, but it just depends on your style, inner feel of the style. And beret, maybe choose one in a larger side or something on a stiffer side, something that would not be too tiny for you and too sleek. So that can look amazing, but also it depends on, I think, personal preference. And it also depends on how large your facial features are, because sometimes some dramatics, they have quite sharp features. Even though they're tall and elongated looking, they still can have some quite sharp features. So for them, smaller beret would look good. And then there are some dramatics who have prominent features, elongated and prominent. So for them, probably that small beret could look as a contrast, just too small piece. Then beanie would look great on anyone. If you feel again that your facial features are too prominent, choose the beanie that is on a bigger side and more chunky. Turban is a great addition. Turban looks very, very exotic, but turban requires a certain style. Okay, let's go to soft dramatics. So from the book, hats should always be theatrical and glamorous, emphasizing rounded shapes and ornate trim. Should be large and oversized. So you can see that nowadays we don't quite use hats like this unless it's like a royal family. They can use slightly ornate hats. If we talk about those casual hats that I chose for you, fedora hat with big brim would look amazing. And David Kibbe says that they just don't look as good in sharp geometrics and in delicate antique styles. So if we talk about something very delicate and antique, that probably would be just too small for them because they have large bone structure and prominent facial features normally. So something like trilby hat probably would be too small. Cloche hat probably would be a little bit too small unless you choose a bigger size because it's quite rounded, so it still might look pretty nice on soft dramatics because they have some romantic undercurrent in them. So some roundness and softness on the crown would look actually pretty cute on them. Bowler hat, it just has a little bit of that Charlie Chaplin feel. Marlene Dietrich, she was soft dramatic, so she was wearing this type of hats. She was one of the first one who actually incorporated those man-style hats into her look. If we talk about regular fedora, just check if it looks too stiff. Choose fedora, but that is made a little bit more like a sun hat. Slightly softer, maybe with some rounded crown, or floppy hat with slightly trapeze and rounded brim. Bucket hat can actually look pretty interesting. However, I noticed that very curvy soft dramatics, they don't look quite good with the bucket hat. It's kind of like too hip-hop and casual for them. They probably would look better in something a little bit more elegant than that. Baseball cap, again, you should choose for yourself. If we talk about those tiny hats like marine cap, newsboy cap, military cap, flat cap, just choose for yourself because it can be quite small for your bone structure and just not fitting the vibe at all. You can try a newsboy hat that is on a larger side, that is not very flat on your head. You can try that one in more casual style looks, or maybe mariner's cap also. You can try that with the hair, but the rest should be more in your own lines. If we talk about beanies, soft knit would look good, not very thin, maybe not super chunky as well. It should better be middle-sized knit. And turban by description is very much soft dramatic. By description, it is draped, it is rounded, and it's mostly on a larger side. If you have that kind of a style, look into turban's version and probably start with something less colorful. Just choose that very classic color, calm color, just get the feel, because sometimes turbans can look amazing. This is what David Kibbe says for romantics about hats: soft and curvy shapes. Picture frame styles, large fluffy fur hats, in case you go skiing or go to Russia in winter. You might not look as good in crisp or man-tailored hats. So see, he's still mentioning picture frame hats, and in my first video I was talking about this type of hats. You probably remember Titanic movie or something like this. So those hats were very popular many decades ago for women. So something crisp probably would not look good on romantics. Anything that is rounded and soft would look good. Fedoras, I still would want you to try fedora because fedora is very universal hat nowadays, especially if on the bottom you have that coat, for example, with some waist emphasis, just something that would feminize you a little bit more. Trilby hat is quite sharp on you, but as far as it's small, that sometimes can work, but still it can be too sharp and too small for you. Then bowler hat is slightly on the rounder side. That is still quite Charlie Chaplin vibe though, so you just want to check for yourself. Boater hat can look amazing on romantics because it gives that Venice kind of a vibe. It looks beautiful with summer dresses. Just try that. Sun hat, amazing. Floppy hat can look amazing because it's quite soft. Cloche hat, you should try this. It's tricky to style, but you should try this. Bucket hat, that can look a little bit too hip-hop-ish on romantics, I think, but you can still try because if you go for something very classic, like something that was made of wool. For example, like I have this very simple bucket hat. It's made of wool and I bought it in H&M actually a couple of years ago. It's one of my favorite hats. And it actually goes with everything, except for I don't wear it in summer. Mariner's cap can be quite not their vibe. It can be slightly too boyish on them. Newsboy cap can look nice because it's quite soft, but still probably not their style direction, but they can still try that. Military cap, I would say more no than yes, and flat cap, I would say more no than yes. It's just harder to style. Look all together. You really want to spend time to actually figure out how to combine top and bottom, so that would look kind of like all together. But women in the same category can be so different. Each romantic is different. I don't want to limit you without seeing you, you know? So just keep in mind that you can still wear whatever you want. It's just sometimes what can happen if you're wearing this or that hat. Now, baseball cap looks great on anyone. It's just depending on what kind of casual style you're wearing. Beret, amazing. Beret is one of those pieces that would look amazing on romantics. It's so easy to style with their lines. Beanie, also great if you're that romantic that has very round and puffy face, that you can go for chunky knit. Chunky or middle knit would look great. If you go for very stretchy material and very thin, that probably would not look quite nice with everything else that you're normally wearing in the bottom. Turban can look amazing. Elizabeth Taylor, she is romantic. She was wearing the turban a lot, probably after she was in the movie Cleopatra. I have the whole review on her style. I'm gonna leave the link down below, where I was explaining you that at some point she started going into that Indian or gypsy style or more Eastern style, and she started trying that very exotic shapes on herself. But again, it requires a certain vision if you know how to incorporate it in your style. Let's talk about theatrical romantic. Rounded shapes, crisp brims, picture frames, small chic cocktail hats with veils or ornate trim. If you need that kind of a dress code, you are the one who will look actually very nice in this hat. You will not look outdated. You will not look like you are wearing a costume. So that would fit you. They might not look as good in sharp men-tailored hats, in floppy hats, in crisp caps, or ethnic hats. So if we talk about fedoras, you see they look great with rounded shapes with crisp brims. So fedora hat would look amazing. So if theatrical romantic is wearing a trilby or a bowler, that can actually be slightly from a different opera for them. It might fit their shape overall because they're also smallish, but it just's not their vibe. They're much juicier than this type of hats. So boater hat would look amazing. Sun hat would look amazing. Floppy hat. David Kibbe says no for floppy hats. I would say that it just depends on what kind, because there are sometimes some floppy hats that just look very elegant and very rounded and soft. So for them, that can look quite chic. Cloche hats, I think that can look amazing. Bucket hats, that's a question because it's a little bit too casual for them probably, but they can try. Mariner's cap, newsboy cap, military cap, flat cap, baseball cap. I have a question about those because they might not be able to easily incorporate into their style. So just try it on yourself and just see if that incorporates, or it can actually work as a contrast with everything else that you're wearing. Beret can look amazing. Just try that. Beanie can look good if it's delicate, if it's not very harsh and chunky. Turban, you still can try turban and just see how it goes and what it goes with, because turbans are harder to style. For naturals, David Kibbe is saying unconstructed styles, large, loose and floppy, shaggy haired fur. And then he says you might not look as good in extremely tailored, crisp styles and in ornate and delicate styles. Even though fedora is quite constructed style hat, I think that can look quite amazing if they balance it with something more unconstructed on the bottom. Even scarf, linen scarf or knitted scarf would actually soften that severeness of the hat. Boater can look amazing. And then what are those unconstructed hats on a larger side? Of course, it's sun hat, it's floppy hat. Cloche hat, I would say it's rounded and quite firm hat. It just depends on what style you're choosing. Then bucket hat would look great on you. Mariner's cap, newsboy cap, military cap, flat cap can look great if they are not too tiny on you. Because if they're too tiny, then your bone structure can look more angular and larger than it actually is as a contrast. You just check it for yourself what kind of style you want to go for, but just in general, if they're not super tiny, if they're not making your head too flat, then you can go for them. They can look amazing. Then baseball cap, of course, yes, for casual style. Beret can look great. Again, not too tiny preferably. Something on a larger side I think would look great. Beanie would look great. Maybe not very delicate and tiny. Not very thin and stretchy fabric, but maybe more on a chunky knit side. I think turban would look amazing. It just depends on a style. You can use turbans in summer, for example, with summer clothes, with summer dresses, or you go to the beach. Here's what David Kibbe says about soft naturals. Hats should be soft and floppy. Also picture frame hats, or rounded and clean, like crisp brimmed straw. Detail should be soft, antique ribbons, lace, or flowers. Fur hats are soft and fluffy. And then he says you might not look as good in severe, man-tailored styles, in small symmetrical styles, in small crisp caps. Fedora, I would say definitely yes. Trilby hat, it can be quite sharp and small for them. Just check for your bone structure after you try the trilby hat. Sometimes you might feel like whether your face is too round or too heavy looking, or your body is too round and heavy looking. Just look at that. Bowler hat is quite rounded hat, but it's quite structured and it's small. So you just again check for yourself. If you don't feel like you look heavier after you're wearing this hat, then you can go for that. 9.5 weeks, Kim Basinger. She is soft natural, so she was wearing that bowler hat. So boater hat would look amazing, sun hat would look amazing, floppy hat would look amazing, cloche hat can look nice if you don't feel like your face and your body looks heavy compared to this hat. If you choose this hat on a larger side, they can look pretty cool. Bucket hat would look great. Then we go to those 5 small caps. Do caps look great on soft naturals? Sometimes, but I noticed that they do look meaty, if it's the right word, comparing to those hats when they're wearing those hats. So choose those hats slightly on a larger side and maybe slightly on more unconstructed side rather than too small constructed and very precise. Baseball cap can look great again if it's on a larger side and if you are balancing it on the bottom. Beret is great again when it's on a larger side slightly and not too flat on top, because you might feel like you have more meaty face after that if it's too tiny. Beanie, it's better when it's chunky knit but still soft looking. When it's slightly fluffy also would look amazing. Not very stretchy and thin beanie. Then turban can look quite effective, especially in summer when you're wearing something linen or cotton on the bottom or you're going to the beach. Now let's go to flamboyant naturals. They look great in extremely bold hats. Chunky geometrics that have soft edges or are irregularly shaped. They might not look as good in sharp tailored small hats, in ornate glitzy and delicate styles, sometimes in small and sharp caps too. Because flamboyant naturals, they have quite a big range of bodies, so they can be on a slimmer side, on a fuller side, chunky geometrics. So for them, fedora hat would look great. Trilby and bowler are quite small hats, so sometimes your bone structure can look too large and elongated compared to those hats, so you should check for yourself, or just choose those hats slightly in a bigger shape for you particularly. Then boater hat would look great, sun hat would look amazing, floppy hat would look perfect, especially if it has bigger brim. That would look great. Cloche hats, probably I would say no to that because it's very small, precise, and squeezing hat shape that as a contrast the rest of your body can just look too elongated and too massive even sometimes. Bucket hat, they can look amazing. Different kinds of caps, again, if it's not too tiny and too precise looking on you, sometimes they can look amazing on these ladies. Sometimes if the lady is on a bigger side and on a softer side, so some flamboyant naturals can be actually quite curvy and they can have some softness on the chest and their hips too. So for these ladies, those caps would look quite awkward maybe, and too tiny and too staccato, too childish. So probably for them would be better if they would choose something on a bigger side or just not choose those at all. Baseball cap would look great for everyday style. Beret, if it's on a larger side and slightly maybe elongated on top, because if it's something that is quite tiny, is hugging the head, it can look quite small on them too. Beanie would look great. Chunky knit beanie would look amazing. Turban can actually look quite exotic on them. It just again depends on a style, but as far as flamboyant naturals look amazing with something unconstructed and very loose and long. And in summer, for example, you can wear this with a summer long dress. Here's what David Kibbe says about hats for classics. Tailored symmetrical shapes, small and crisp with even brims. They might not look as good in oversized, ornate, or sharply angular hats. So if we talk about fedora, it's beautiful. Trilby hat, some trilby hats, they just on a smaller side, so their top can look quite small, like a small pyramid, like a small triangular. In this case, it actually squeezes your head on top and kind of is making the appearance of something small in your head, and your body kind of looks bigger and your face looks bigger, and you might not like it. Just choose a trilby hat that would be closer a little bit to fedora, so something in between. Then bowler hat can look quite interesting. You might feel like it's too childish looking maybe sometimes, so you just choose for yourself. Boater hat would look amazing. amazing. Sun hat would look beautiful. Floppy hats, they don't have crisp brim. That's what David Kibbe suggests for classics, having crisp brim. But still, you can try them on, because I also noticed that floppy hats now is not same as floppy hats in the 80s. Because floppy hats now can be done with actually pretty crisp material. This hat is also floppy, but it keeps its shape quite well because it's kind of like that fedora hat as well. So it's like both, it's 2 in 1. You see, it has that wavy line here. For classic, it will be maybe a little bit untidy looking, but still you can try that. Cloche hat can look quite interesting on classics and quite good actually. If it looks sleek, if it has that natural color and minimalistic look in it, it can look amazing. Bucket hat can look great if it's not over the top and noisy, but if it's very classic looking, it would look amazing. Baseball cap can look great, especially if you choose it in, for example, leather style or in linen styles, in a fabric that is closer to your fabric. So that would look much more expensive on you. Then all those small caps, that can look actually quite chic on you if you go for that style for every day. It's just when it's too crisp and smallish, then probably that would look just not for you. Even though proportionally it can look okay, it might not feel your vibe. But if you combine it with something also classy on the bottom, for example, striped t-shirt or striped long sleeve top, it can look quite impressive on you. Maybe not newsboy because it's quite unconstructed. I would say go for military or mariner's cap. Beret would look amazing for classics, of course. Beanie would look great on classics, maybe not super chunky knit, somewhere in the middle. You can go for wool, we can go for cashmere. Turban, I would say more no than yes style-wise. That exotic thing probably is not quite for them, but again, it depends on what kind of turban. Now let's go to soft classic. Here's what David Kibbe says about hats. Small and elegant with rounded shapes and clean, crisp brims. Picture frame or garden party styles with soft detail, silk, flowers, etc. They might not look as good in severe men-tailored hats, in large unconstructed hats, in small perky caps. Fedora should look great. Trilby, if it's not too sharp, will look nice. Bowler can look quite interesting. Boater, of course, will look amazing, especially in summer. Sun hat, if it's not too large and floppy looking, that can look amazing. Floppy hat, again, it depends on what kind. If it's too floppy and unconstructed, probably no. But if it's more on a trim side, not too large and keeps its shape still, with slightly wavy brim, it can look very elegant on them, like those modern floppy hats. If we talk about cloche hat, it requires a certain style, but I would say yes. Bucket hat, also if it's not super crazy design, but it's made in more classic and modest shape and fabric, I would say definitely yes. Then David Kibbe says in those small perky caps. Which one of these caps do you consider perky? What do you think? I think that baseball cap, it already is like more classic, casual style cap. We're not touching this probably. If it's made with more expensive fabric, I think that would look so elegant on soft classics. If we talk about other caps, mariner's cap, newsboy cap, military cap, flat cap, it requires work a little bit more on your style probably, because if you're wearing dress with ruffles, I would say definitely not, because that eclectic style normally kills that elegance in soft classics. So they look better a little bit when they build their outfit head to toe, rather than make one piece from one style era, another piece from another style era. That is not soft classic nature normally. If they're wearing that kind of cap, they kind of have to match on the bottom. It's better. So I can imagine them wearing this cap as a classic outfit with stripy top and maybe a small red scarf and classic bag and something like this. Beret, of course, I would say yes, would look beautiful. Beanie, I would say yes, if it's done in a soft manner, not super chunky knit and not super thin as well. Turban, that's a style situation, but I think they can also incorporate turban in their style. Dramatic classic, crisply tailored styles, sharp edges and contrasting trim, moderate to small size, geometric and clean shapes. They might not look as good in fussy hats with ornate trim, in oversized styles, in severe styles, in unconstructed or floppy styles. It's interesting what he says about dramatic classics, that they look good in moderate and small shapes. So fedoras, any kind of fedoras would look amazing. Trilby actually would look amazing on dramatic classics because it's moderate to small size. Bowler can look amazing if they go for that certain style. Boater would look amazing. Sun hat would look amazing if it's not too floppy and unconstructed looking. Floppy hats, he's saying no for floppy and constructed. I would say yes, because modern floppy styles, as I said before, are not the ones that they were in the 80s. In the 80s, they were real unconstructed and made with very soft fabric. They didn't keep its shape. They didn't look tidy enough for classics especially. But floppy hats now, they keep its shape. Again, showing you this, my fedora, yeah, slightly floppy, can look great for everyday style. Cloche hat, I would say it's rounded and quite firm hat. It just depends on what style you're choosing. Then bucket hat would look great on you. Then those different caps, they can look actually very effective. Newsboy cap is a little bit more on unconstructed side, so just make sure that it's not too flat on your head. Maybe if it's slightly higher on top, that would be better. Flat caps can look actually pretty cool. Mariners caps and military caps would look great because they keep its shape. Baseball caps would look amazing. Berets would look amazing. That can be more Spanish style beret when it's more sharp and bigger diameter of the beret, and that is sitting like that, or more French style that is more rounded and kind of small, tiny. Now beanie would look amazing. Chunky knit or middle-sized knit would look great. Turban, also possible, I think, incorporate in their style, but it requires a certain style for them. Now let's go for gamine family. So for gamines, David Kibbe is saying small, crisply tailored hats. Caps, Spanish cap, this is what Google showed me. Beret, Indian cap, cloche. So this is the first time where David Kibbe says this word, cloche hat, for gamines, which is interesting. They might not look as good in oversized, unconstructed, and floppy styles, in ornate styles. So fedora would look great on gamines, of course. Trilby hat, that was created for gamines. Bowler hat, created for gamines. Boater hat, amazing. Sun hat, we need to see, because if it's very large brim and very soft brim, probably that will be just not for gamines. They will look like umbrella in this hat. Floppy hat. Today's floppy hat that looks slightly more constructed and maybe not with super large brim, but with shorter brim, looks kind of in between floppy hat and fedora, I think would look perfect for gamines, for everyday style. But for gamines, crisp brim look better. Cloche hat, as David Kibbe said, that looks good on them. Bucket hat would look perfect, amazing. Mariners cap, beautiful. Newsboy cap, nice if it's not too rounded and unconstructed looking. So for them, if we talk about caps, for them it's much better to choose military cap or mariners cap. Flat cap also can look quite effective on them, especially if they kind of wear this tomboy style, more like old English style. That can look very, very on point. Just make sure you don't look too costumish. So if you over try with that old English style, that can look too theatrical. But if you apply some elements of that style, for example, if you're using flat cap and vest, that can look brilliant. So baseball cap, great. Beret, very nice. Beanie, great. Chunky beanie or thinner beanie, but it mostly depends on your face. If you have wider bones on your face, better choose chunky knit or regular knit. If your face is very thin, triangular, very dry, you can actually try for very thin beanies too. So turban for gamine is like a different style. However, I can imagine them wearing a small turban in summer when they go for the beach, or they are in a very hot country and they are wearing, like, let's say that very structured linen dress and they have this small turban on top. I think that can look quite stunning, quite elegant. Let's go to soft gamines. Should be small and crisp in rounded shapes with minimal trim. Veils, feathers, etc. Crisp caps are also good, but keep the shapes small and rounded. They might not look as good in oversized hats, in unconstructed floppy hats, in man-tailored hats. So again, if we talk about fedora is very balanced hat from my viewpoint, so it will look amazing on soft gamines. Of course, it depends on what kind. If it's very, very large, probably that would not look as good, because soft gamine, she would look like a little girl in her dad's hat. Just use a fedora in a slightly smaller shape. Trilby is actually considered to be man-tailored hat, and they don't quite look very good in man-tailored hats. But still, I think if trilby is not so severe and so sharp, I think that would look amazing on soft gamines. Bowler hat would look great on soft gamines. Boater hat would look amazing if the brim is not very, very large. Sun hat, again, would look great if the brim is not very large, but on a smaller side. Floppy hat, he says no, but if we talk about 80s floppy hats, it's different from nowadays floppy hats. So I would would say get floppy hat. That would be amazing, but just get a smaller brim, not too large brim. Cloche hat can look very cute, but then you should choose the style. Bucket hat can look very cute. It just should not look very severe, but just in general, bucket hat would look beautiful. All those caps, mariner's cap, newsboy cap, military cap, flat cap, can look quite nice. If we talk about newsboy cap, that one looks a little bit like beret with a visor, so probably that one would look more soft on them. And baseball cap, I think it's very universal. It's more a style choice rather than type of the body. Beret would look great, amazing. Beanie would look amazing. Beanie, you should better choose something with chunky knit, because that will balance the prominences on your face and it will make it look very cute and actually elongate your crown a little bit. It can balance the look very well. Turbans, I think very similar situation to gamines. Turban can look quite effective. In summer, for example, I can imagine them wearing bikini or simple linen dress with a turban and go into the beach. I think that would be great. Last but not least, flamboyant gamine. Hats should be small and crisp in irregularly sculpted, geometric or asymmetrical shapes. Crisp ethnic caps are excellent. Berets, Nerus, this is how Nerus look, Spanish, etc. They might not look as good in oversized, unconstructed and floppy styles, in delicate ornate styles. So fedora again looks amazing. Trilby, beautiful. Bowler, amazing. Boater, amazing. Sun hat, great, unless it's not too oversized and not too floppy and huge brim. I would say keep it on a trimmer side, on a smaller side, but great. Floppy hat, again, today's floppy hat that is mixture with fedora, I would say for sure yes, if not the very large brim. Cloche hat, I would say probably no, unless it's a certain style of a hat. Nowadays they sometimes make very interesting cloche hats that are not very sleek, that are slightly more like a bell shape, but they're slightly wider sometimes around the brow area, for example, or on top even. They're sitting slightly more on top. So they can try that if they want to try that kind of a style. Bucket hat, beautiful. Mariner's cap, all those caps would look amazing. Baseball cap, mariner's cap, newsboy cap, military cap. Great, beautiful. Just keep in mind that if your face is too wide, then don't get a newsboy cap. Just better get something more on a taller side and more structured, like military or a captain's cap. Even leather captain's cap would look amazing. Beret, beautiful. Beanie, amazing. Maybe choose chunky knit. It will stand up, extend the crown. That would look great. Turban, depends. I can see how it can be incorporated not only to a summer style, but also to a glamorous style. Alright, that's it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. All the hats that I mentioned today, I'm gonna leave the links on them down below. When you're buying the hat in the shop though, make sure that you can return, because some shops don't let return hats unless you are sure it's not a big deal for you. Alright, click the join button or subscribe on my Patreon. You will help me a lot to grow my channel if you liked my videos. Also, if you put a like button, YouTube will recommend my video to 10 more people. So that's a lot. Please do this and I'll be very happy. Also, subscribe to this channel. I'll see you next week. Bye.